Hello, everybody. This is Nick Christopher from Mob Tales. Hope you guys are doing well today. We have a very special guest today, old friend, very talented individual, club owner, promoter, you name it, he does it. Noel Ashman. Noel, thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
That's great, brother. Well, I'm going to just shoot out some questions to you about what you've been doing. You've been in the entertainment industry for a long time, and you've wore many hats. One of them is being club owner and producer, film producer. Was it easy to transition from one to the other?
Strangely, yes. It's funny. A guy who was my assistant actually many years ago had kind of after he left me, he worked for Mark Wahlberg, and then approached me about doing a movie with him. And I had absolutely, I was at time I had just opened my first club, Veruca. That's the first club I opened as an owner. And it was interesting because I was just kind of last thing on my mind. And he's like, I want you to produce a movie with me. And I'm like, I'm a club owner. What do I know about doing movies? He's like, it's the same skills. It's getting talent, it's knowing what's hot, it's being able to get publicity on it, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, all right, I'll give it a shot. And that was a Speedway Junkie that we did.
Yes, I remember.
Yeah, it was Gus Van Sant, and it starred like Daryl Hannah and Patsy Kensit, Tiff Amber Thiessen, a bunch of people, Warren G. So yeah, it was sort of a smooth transition, I guess. I mean, I'm still learning everything, but it's I've enjoyed it.
Well, since then, there was like, you had projects, recently, really. You had projects recently like Wire Room and Fortress with Bruce Willis, which is pretty awesome. How were those two projects going? What are they kind of feedback you've been getting on both of those?
Good. They were both different types of movies, but yeah, I mean, it was amazing to be able to produce Bruce in two of his last movies. He's such an icon and such a legend. Someone I've always had such great respect for. I actually met him first in the early '90s, back even before I was a club owner, when I was actually just doing events at clubs. This is way before I was a teenager when I first met him. But he's always, such a gentleman, and in my opinion, one of the great actors of all time. So it was an honor to be able to produce something he was starring in.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I remember you, and I've been there because you were nice enough to welcome me there. The Club Lenora, which was like the last club I think you had, and you worked with. You had a lot. You used to have a lot of different celebrities come by your place. People probably interested in how you were able to cultivate these relationships with so many celebrities. How were you able to be able to establish that connection?
Good question. I don't know. It's something I know that a lot of people in my business spend a lot of time trying to do that. It's not something I ever really put time into. It just sort of happened. I think I became friends with a bunch of kind of high profile people, and through them I just met everybody. But I always consider a lot. I always consider myself sort of a shy guy, and never, not typical for who's in my business.
Well, you've been. I know I've seen you with a lot of different celebrities, people that I've met, even with you. Would you say that Ice-T is one of your more closest friends in that kind of circle? Because I've seen him support you a lot, and you guys have worked together a lot. Would you say that being true?
Yeah, I mean, Ice-T's awesome. He's really a really good human being and a real gentleman. In the true sense of the word, very loyal, very straightforward. And yeah, he's an awesome friend. I love the guy, both as a human being and as a talent. I think Ice is actually an incredibly talented actor. I think he's underrated because he has such a strong personality. I think he's often underrated in his acting ability, of how really good he is. In this movie, 3 Days Rising, I just shot with him. he plays a character completely different than what you'd expect, and he's amazing at it. So yeah, I love Ice, and I love working with him. He's someone I always like to get involved in projects that I do, because he's just, he's going to be good at anything you throw at him, and I enjoy him as a person. He's amazing to work with.
Yes, I would agree. I had the pleasure of meeting Ice-T with Coco at one of the events many, many years ago.
Yeah, Coco's awesome too. He's
Yeah,
awesome.
Coco's very nice too. Yes, she is.
Yeah.
It's interesting what I would just harping a little bit when it comes to Ice-T. When you see him on Law and Order and his character and the way he acts, it's almost completely different than his real personality. It's like night and day almost. I mean, would you agree?
Yeah, look, Ice is a great actor. People don't give him the credit I think he deserves as an actor, just because he has such a strong personality, so multi-dimensional with music and everything he does. So I think people kind of overlook the skill he has in acting. But I think I've always thought he's an amazing actor, and working with him, be able to see him up close and watch him do stuff, it's amazing. I mean, he's really, really talented in a way that I don't think people realize.
Well, speaking about talent, it's interesting you brought that up. There was a project you did called Wasted Talent, which is a story about Lilo. And I know Lilo as well, great guy. I definitely still think he got a bum rap, but that is a very interesting project which won an award in one of the festivals. Can you give us a little bit of can people get a chance to see that project in anywhere where we can find that to take a look at it?
Yeah, it's on almost every streaming service, I believe. I know it's on Amazon and a bunch more. So yeah, it's pretty easy to see.
Yeah, Lilo's another interesting person. I know you guys were good friends. Um, is Lilo still doing the acting thing? I think he is, right? From what I understand.
Yeah, he's still getting some stuff. He's been doing, I think, kind of like horror stuff lately. But yeah, no, look, Lilo's a very talented dude, no question about it.
Oh,
And it's so his whole story is fascinating. I knew him since he did Bronx Tale, basically. So I've known him for many years.
but I mean, you ran like the last place you had, I think, was Lenora, if I'm correct. And I think it's been a while since you've been, running nightclubs. So because you've been so busy with the film stuff. Um, do you, do you ever think about going back into that business, or you think that the club business has changed too much?
Yeah, I mean, I still do events. I mean, I haven't owned a club since Leonora, so I've been out. I haven't owned a club in a while, but I still do lots of events, special events at clubs, and I still do some advising, et cetera, with clubs. So I still have my feet in it, and it's funny you mentioned it, because I actually am looking at spaces a little bit now, to potentially open something that's very small, private type of thing. It's definitely harder for me now because of my films and my schedule, because of the films, where I just don't have used to, when I was a club, it would be kind of my life. I would, I'd be there all the time, and that would be the majority of the things that I did. I don't really have, I'm not really able to do that now because I have so many other projects coming. But I have a bunch of partners who I think could be very good. So we're looking at potentially doing something where I, don't have to give it 100%, where I could kind of be there 50% of the time, and still, 40, 50% of the time, still give 50 or 60% of my time toward my films. So we're looking at that. We'll see if I find the perfect place, we would do it.
But in general, I mean, do you feel, I mean, I know during your heyday, the club scene was pretty good. It's changed a lot since then. I mean, what is your opinion on what the club scene is now compared to when you were like, in your heyday, like doing with Plum and all the other places that you had? It's a big difference that it was then, correct?
Sure. I mean, the club scene always changes. I mean, I agree with you, actually, that it's not quite what it used to be right now. I mean, it's gotten very commercial now. There's not as much high end at clubs anymore, for a number of reasons. There aren't a lot of clubs that really have the ability to get that high end. I think, camera phones and all that stuff has stopped a lot of very high-end people from going out because they feel like they're always going to be on camera no matter what they do. Certainly, I mean, my opinion is the heyday of clubs was before I was, when I was a toddler. Probably the heyday of clubs was probably like Studio 54 and that time, which I unfortunately missed because I was, as I said, a toddler at the time. But I was lucky to be in it for a lot of time. And yeah, I think it was at its best in my lifetime when I was very young, when I was actually doing events at clubs. The time from when I was, I started going to clubs when I was 12. So I think in the 80s when I was, first started going to clubs when I was literally 12 years old, I think the club scene was probably at its best. I think it dipped a little bit in the early 90s and then came back with a vengeance toward the end of the 90s with my old club Veruca, with Moomba. There were a couple clubs back then that really, I think, hit and brought a lot of the old scene back. But yeah, I think it's I think you had Veruca, you had Plum, you had Bungalow 8, you had Beatrice, you had a couple of clubs in that time. And I think that since then there's been definitely a bit of a lull. So that's part of the reason I'm considering doing something.
There's not as many clubs are open, I mean, out there as there used to be. Used to be like one in every corner. Now it's like, it's not as many as there was before.
Actually, strangely, that's actually not true. Actually, there are a lot in volume. There are a lot more clubs now than there were back then. The problem is there aren't a lot of good clubs.
Oh, quality. Okay, quality.
Yeah, back then, you'd have, at any given time, 5, 6 clubs that were kind of fighting to be the hot spot. Now, you probably have 150 clubs who are fighting to be the hot spot. But the problem is because of that, and because a lot of changes in clubs, there aren't a lot of clubs that get it, that get the high quality. And that's what the problem is. I always said back, if you look at clubs back in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, the time when I was doing it, you had like me, you had like Amy Sacco from Bungalow 8. If you look at people who had done clubs back then, you had like Eric Good, who did like Area and MK. You had Nell Campbell, Keith McNally, Lynn Wagonex, who did Nell's. People who did clubs back in the day, if they weren't doing clubs, they would have been like an actor or a director or an artist or a producer. But people who owned clubs back then were really in the arts, and clubs were an extension of the arts. Now, if you look at most people who own clubs, nothing against them. There are some great people who do, but most of them are more financial. If they weren't owning a club, they'd be working a hedge fund. They're not artistically creative in the same way that club owners were back then. That's one of the problems why clubs have dipped a lot. I think clubs used to be a place where creative people would go and hang out. You had back, I mean, again, before my time, but you had like Andy Warhol, you had Keith Haring, you had all these interesting people, writers, artists, who'd go out to clubs every night. Calvin Klein used to go out to clubs and Donna Karan to get ideas of their, new fashions and stuff. Now clubs are, bottle service changed a lot, where bottle service, which I'm partially obviously responsible for, because Veruca, my club, was one of the first to have bottle service in America, actually. Might have been the first, actually, now that I think about it. But, when we did it, we didn't do it to just make money. We did it as a convenience to our customers. Because at the time I used to hang out in Europe a lot. I used to go to clubs a lot, Amsterdam and London, Paris, all over the place. And they all had bottle service, and it just seemed so much more sophisticated. In America, you have a waitress with 15 drinks, spilling all over the place, trying to put on your table. And in Europe, you got your mixers, you got your bottle. It just made so much more sense, and that's why I started it. But from then, a lot of people took that idea, and then they said, well, hey, we can make money off this. Let's not let people in the club unless they're buying 5 bottles or whatever it is. And what that did was that really changed what a VIP is. Back in the day, a VIP was someone who dressed well, was good looking, was interesting, was artsy, was different, um, was successful, etc. Now VIPs are whoever spends the most money at a table, and those are not normally the people who are the most artistic or interesting. That's
Yeah.
what's really clubs. And then what clubs have to do is they have they have a club full of basically stockbrokers, and then they're like, oh shit, this is, no one wants to be here, so let's get girls. So they pay promoters ridiculous amounts of money just to bring girls who are looking at their phone every 5 minutes until they have to leave. So that's where I think has made clubs a little more difficult now.
Right. I agree with you. That's true. I've seen that. Well, being that this show is called Mob Tales, we just want to bring a little bit of that genre into this conversation. Um, I know you've worked with a couple of guys that are known for those kind of roles, like Eric Roberts, Vinny Pastore, just to name a few. And you work with both these gentlemen. Um, I know some of the projects you've done, I've never really were in that mob genre, really. Um, Most of them are very different. They're more like action packed, kind of crime dramas, but very different. Um, with working with those kind of gentlemen that bring that kind of flavor to your projects, what was it like working with guys like that? I mean, these guys were like, Eric is like a legend almost. He's been around for years. That must have been interesting.
Yeah, well, both those guys are awesome to work with. Eric had more of a cameo role on a movie I did called Clinton Road, but he was awesome. Very nice guy, very good to work with. Vinny, I know very well. I've done 2 movies with Vinny, but I've known him for a long time, and they're great. Those are exactly the kind of guys you want in a lot of these action New York movies, because that's they bring that real. Vinny particularly is just exudes New York. He's just and yeah, I think that when you look at all these stories of mobsters and stuff, it always makes for great film, because it has all the characteristics you want in a film. Suspense, action, killing. You have it. So it's having those guys, having those themes, always makes for exciting film.
Yeah, especially tough guys like them. Well, on a further note, can you give us a little bit of update on what you're going to be doing? I know 2022 is almost done. Obviously, we've got another month. What has Noel Ashman got planned for 2023?
Well, just got a lot happening right now. We're probably gonna do a big New Year's Eve party, which should be fun, to take us in. uh, and then I have a bunch of movies coming out. My movie 3 Days Rising should be coming out in the first 4 or 5 months of the year. My movie called Cash Out, which is kind of a crime thriller with John Travolta, Natalie Ura, Quavo from Migos, Kristen Davis, Lucas Haas. It's a great cast. That should be coming out, I think, late February, early March. And then we're going to shoot a sequel to it the end of March. So those are 2 media things I have. But I have probably 8 other movies right now that we're trying to get together. We're trying to figure which one we're going to do first, but I'll probably be shooting one of them in the first 3 or so months of the year as well.
Wow.
I'm also going to be directing a movie pretty soon. That should probably be later in the year, which will be my first feature that I actually direct. I'm going to co-direct it. And what else? I'm working on writing a book, which has been taking quite a bit of time. And that's about it, right? That's about it right now. That I'm looking at some clubs to potentially.
That's right. I remember you mentioned. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, the book part, let me know. Maybe I can help you with that. Well,
Absolutely.
you know that. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. Well, no, I really appreciate you coming on. It was freaking awesome having you. Definitely have to stay in touch. Like I said, we'd love to have you maybe on a show, maybe another time when you do some more of your things, we can promote it. if you want to leave with anything that you want people to know or look out for, you can let us know.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. And yeah, I mean, if people want to see what I'm doing, usually I guess Instagram is probably the best way to catch it. At Noel Ashman, NoelAshman on Instagram. And I usually put a lot of my new stuff and projects and stuff on there. And otherwise, yeah, man, let's do it again soon.
All right, that sounds good, brother. Well, thank you much once again. And this is Nick Christopher from Mob Tales, and thanks guys for looking at the show. Subscribe, like, share, do whatever you like, comment, and check out Noel. He's an awesome guy. Thank you.